And I wanted to do something that was going to have a major impact on the world. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do it myself. And it worked like magic. Look, this is my fourth company and I've never seen anything like this. Never. The phone's ringing. I mean, we don't even have to do marketing at all in order to get major clients. I mean, the demand is overwhelming. It's far greater than we imagined. It's the biggest revolution in transportation in over 100 years.
Welcome to the Venture to Victory podcast. I'm your host, Tim Tonella, and we are so excited. We have Daniel Laury in the house today. And if you love technology, I mean leading ed technology, robotics, drones, driverless cars, you're not going to want to miss this episode. You're going to hear from one of the original founders on the autonomous driving side in the delivery area. So we're so excited. How you doing, Daniel? Great to have you on board.
Doing very well, Tim. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
That's awesome. So kind of a quick intro to tee this up. Daniel is a 4 or 5 time serial entrepreneur who started in his native country of France. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. He founded one of the largest independent digital marketing companies in the world, where they had offices throughout the US and Europe. Daniel also built one of the first and largest online free lotto games back in the year 2000. Believe it or not, he had 20 million active members. Think again, this is back in 2000, which at its high mark was the 17th most visited site in the world. So Daniel's been involved from the very beginning. And then in 2015, Daniel started the Explorer Group, which is an early stage VC fund, which looks at independent seed investments. And they also do Series A co-participation. But the fund has also acted in some ways like a venture studio in co-developing opportunities, of which UDelv, the automated driverless delivery vehicle service, is one of those. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. So Daniel, we are really pumped to have you on board today.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start this off. We're going to jump right into what I call the world of autonomous driving drones and robots and the like. And going back when you started this company or had this idea, I remember you calling me up and we got together for lunch and you told me about this incredible idea you had of building a fleet of autonomous driving delivery vehicles that could pick up groceries at the store for you and deliver them in real time. And it would just drive there, perfect service, never had to worry about the driver in any way. And at the time, Waymo, Google, and, Tesla wasn't even talking about the robo-taxis at the time. This is actually, that was stuff that was in development, but it hadn't kind of met the public domain. And I thought for a minute, wow, Daniel is either totally insane or he is crazy as a fox, because this was such an ambitious project. My thought was always these autonomous driving technologies required a ton of capital, and huge companies, like Mercedes and Tesla, were investing billions of dollars to try to figure this all out. And they're just trying to get a person or two from point A to point B without a driver. And not only did Daniel want to do that, he wanted to add all the commerce and delivery. And it was a scope that was just fascinating. And I remember you came to me with just this idea, essentially on a napkin. It wasn't really a napkin, but we had some napkins at lunch back then. And you said, to get us started, we'd like your help because we had to go out and find a technical architect, a CTO, to do this. And these type of people were very difficult to find. They were in the back doing skunk work type, for these large corporations. And to get them to actually leave what they were doing, come out to California, be part of a small startup company that had really kind of limited funding, had funding, but not like massive amounts of funding at the time, was a huge challenge. And so we had the task of going out and selling the dream to an amazing person who would give up everything and join this startup to be on the edge of the envelope and maybe change the world. And together we did that successfully. And that was kind of the beginning of UDelv being born. And it's so exciting to hear about it. We're going to get into that right now. So I'd love to know a little bit about how you came up with the idea, this incredible idea in the first place. What were some of the barriers you hit and kind of where you are today with the project?
Sure. And I'll start with that, saying that MatchStar was an incredible help. And as you rightly said, you were at the very beginning of this, and you're able to find a needle in a haystack. And that's what I think is incredible about MatchStar is that we tell you what we're looking for, and somehow you're able to find the person and then convince them to come on board. And it's been a fantastic relationship. You should be incredibly proud of the company that you've built. Um, how this all came about was in the time frame of 2016, 2017. In fact, I had just sold my prior company, and I was looking to do the next thing, and I wanted to do something that was going to be to have a major impact on the world. And that's how I got the idea of starting a small venture capital group with some of my money and some friends' money, and wanted to invest in exponential technologies per the definition of Singularity University. Um, and so those are moonshots. And amongst other things, I was looking at autonomous driving, of course, in 2016. And I realized a few things. First of all, I realized that Google had been at it for 9 years already at the time, or even a little bit more than that. It started with the Grand DARPA Challenge in 2007, which was a military contest, and where they were asking university teams to compete to make an autonomous vehicle go through, navigate basically a track in the desert. I think it was like Nevada or something like that. And three teams came in front, up in front. One was MIT, the other one was Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. I think those were the top three. And Google bought or somehow acquired the Stanford team. And that was the start of Google X and what later became Waymo. But when I looked at it in 2017, and I said, Google's been at it for 10 years with a Stanford super smart Stanford team. It's a little bit foolish to try to compete against them head to head. So my first thought was, contrary to any other company in the field, perhaps the reason why I'm a survivor to this day was to say, I'm not going to focus on the autonomous driving system per se, because I think this is going to be requiring billions of dollars. And, Google's at it with not only the money, but also the best talents in the world and the best
Sure.
resources in the world. And instead of that, focus on the application. Um, and um, and I looked at applications, and back at the time, you were talking, still today, about robotaxis. The companies that were competing in the field were all thinking about doing passenger cars and robotaxis. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the history of transportation, for the last 2,000 years or so. And I'm thinking that every new mode of transportation started with cargo first, because it's safer and it's easier to carry goods than people. If you look back, what very few people know is that the first vehicle ever built in the world was in 1769, and it was actually a Frenchman called Cugnot, Cugnot, and he built the first steam engine. And that engine was for the French armies to carry pieces of artillery. It wasn't meant for people. It took about 100 years, for other people to think, oh my God, we could carry people in this thing. Trains were made for freight at the beginning, and coal in England. Same thing with airplanes, which carried airmail before carrying passengers, and same thing for rockets, and so forth, so on. So I said the first large-scale application of autonomous vehicles is going to be delivery. It is safer and easier to carry goods than people. And so I really wanted to invest in a company that was going to do autonomous delivery. I couldn't find one, so I said, you know what, I'm going to do it myself.
I'm casually going to build one. By the way, Has that perspective shifted? Because I know when we started talking
Not at
about
all.
this, well, the Waymos were not around. Now, the
Yeah.
last 2 years, they've been driving all over our neighborhoods. I've driven in them many times. It's a lot of fun if you come to San Francisco to check it out. So you can visually see that and you feel the presence of that now. But it was really a concept that the idea of, any type of vehicle on the road driving without, an actual driver in there. It was literally just a concept. And so the idea of what you wanted to do was even larger. But you think in spite of the Waymo having success and then combined with, Elon Musk's vision of this robotaxi service, that goods will the goods over people will be the first largest application, at least the one that makes the most money at first.
Yeah, totally. Like the fun thing is that nothing has changed since the beginnings in 2016 or 2017. Like the first of all, pretty much all the startups that tried to do an autonomous driver failed and
Yeah,
are in a business today. You're literally down to less than a handful of companies in the non-Chinese world, mostly Americans, that are capable of spending the money. And it's not just about spending the money; it's also having a data set that is large enough to be able to train the AI, the neural networks, and enable to safely drive autonomously. And you're talking about Tesla, Waymo, Cruise is no longer in the business. Argo
yeah,
is no longer in the business. Zoox, because it's Amazon and they got unlimited funding almost.
yeah,
And a couple other ones. And of course, Mobileye, which is a major contender, and maybe one or two other ones. And that's it in the non-Chinese world. All the other ones have disappeared, number one. Number two, the remaining companies are all focused on robotaxis, and that's for historical reasons. That's how they started. They've always thought that this was going to be the largest market, and they, for reasons that date back, the Uber Lyft competition, and all the history about this. They all been thinking that this was going to be the largest market, the one they wanted to go after because there was a race about that. So none of those companies are in the delivery space. And there's a gigantic vacuum in that area. And that's where UDelv comes into the picture, because that's we're the only ones now in the non-Chinese world to provide what we're doing. And the third one was, and it's still valid, was that it was going to be a dedicated application. And that's been for delivery, and it's changing, revolutionizing the world of delivery, because for when you think about autonomous delivery, for the last and middle mile, you need to think about a something that's never been done before, which is what we're doing with the UDelv transporter. What I mean by that is that when you're talking about autonomous vehicles for delivery, you have two major segments in this industry. You have the segment which is point to point, long haul trucking, to coast, or things like where you can automate the tractor, but you don't really have to change the business model of the trailer, because you load the trailer at one point and you unload the trailer on the other side. So you automate the tractor, but you don't have to change the business model of the trailer. But the moment you have more than one stop or two stops in a delivery route, which is the majority of the routes for last mile and middle mile, you need a system, an intelligent cargo container where the recipient of the goods is not going to take somebody else's. If you have 2, 3, 4, 10, 100 stops on a route, you don't, and there's no driver to give you your package. You want to be able to remove your package without taking somebody else, or let alone having to choose amongst 100 other ones.
Yeah.
And that's where the transporter comes into the picture, and is a revolution, because we have created a flexible system to be able to carry all sorts of goods with flexible shelvings, and a software-controlled system to retrieve your goods without taking somebody else's.
Yeah. No, it sounds absolutely amazing, man. I've actually seen it.
Yes.
in motion an earlier prototype. The new one, which I've just shown some video on this podcast of that, is really pretty amazing. I've always wondered, will people try to pirate cargo in the future when there is no driver? Particularly like a UPS truck would be filled with lots of goods, but there's a driver. Have you guys ever thought about that aspect of it coming into play, and how would that work?
Yeah, that'd be a very bad idea, because you have 21 cameras
Oh
around
my
this
gosh.
thing. So if you think
Yeah.
you can avoid being recognized, that's a bad idea.
And
I do not recommend doing that.
yeah. And by the time this is fully mainstream, they'll probably be doing facial recognition immediately. They'll know
Absolutely.
everything about the individual within 2 seconds. And
Yeah.
we'll send out the notice to the local police department with the
So-
vehicle identification to go get
so
them.
that-
I could totally see
another-
that.
There's a secondary question linked to that, like trying to tamper with the vehicle itself. That's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. There you got 21 cameras. Now, the other question is, could there be a cybersecurity threat? Somebody hacking the system, and that is going to be hard to happen, because in fact, the autonomous system that's embedded in the vehicle does not talk to the cloud for the driving system itself. So unless you hack the main servers with the data sets and the main algorithms somewhere else, what's in the vehicle is protected by the fact that it doesn't communicate to the cloud in order to drive.
Gotcha. And so where are you guys? Like, where are you in terms of stage of development now? Because it's such a aggressive kind of big picture vision that you have.
Yes. Yeah. So we've had a very, very pragmatic approach. We wanted to put the client first and understand what the client needed in such a configuration. And so we started in 2018 and created the very first autonomous vehicle in the world for delivery. And that was our first generation vehicle in California, and you've seen it. And
Of course.
we did some work with Dragers and San Mateo.
Yeah.
And it was basically a small vehicle that was we designed on a basically enhanced golf cart called a neighborhood electric vehicle. It was limited to 25 miles an hour, limited to I think a top speed of 40 miles or range a range of 40 miles, and it had we had created a system of fixed compartments on the flatbed behind it, a little bit like a Amazon on wheels, if you will. Fixed lockers on wheels. And we experimented with it with about a dozen different types of merchants in California in 2018. Very different ways. Like we had a pharmacy, we had a florist, a couple of restaurants, of course, a grocery store, so far, so on. And we realized many things. It failed miserably. And that was the story of 2018. The vehicle was too slow, couldn't go on highways. The range was ridiculously low. And this, most importantly, the system of fixed lockers didn't work because they were either too big or too small for what we wanted to carry. So when they're too big, you carry air, which is not smart, especially on an electric vehicle. But when they're too small, you can't carry anything at all, which is even more stupid. So so we said, okay, that doesn't work. We got to go to another concept, and we went back to the drawing board. And after 6 months of thinking and about it, we invented the concept of flexible shelving, a little bit like an IKEA cabinet, if you will, where you can add or remove shelves in the cabinet. And once you do that, you can no longer have a fixed door because they would open on nothing or on too many shelves. And so we invented this, what we call the iris mechanism, which is the horizontal curtain and a vertical one behind it to create a rectangle anywhere you want on the surface of the pod. And it's all controlled by software, like magic. It's beautiful. And And we created we created a second version of the vehicle, second generation, based this time on a Ford Transit Connect. And because that would give us the range and give us the speed, and and to experiment. And we experimented with 40,000 deliveries. We did about 8,000 deliveries for Walmart in Phoenix, Arizona, and about 30,000 deliveries for an auto parts distributor in Texas called Excel Parts.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked like magic. It
Awesome.
was like it was a small version of what you see today, and it was you had a safety operator, and and all that things.
Yeah.
But we experimented with the concept was very, and then COVID hit, and of course all the operations got frozen, so forth, so on. And in 2022, I decided to take a big step forward. And really go to the ultimate version of what a dedicated autonomous delivery vehicle should be, which is a vehicle that has no cabin, no occupant. You do not need a cabin if you're going to be autonomous
Right.
on the delivery.
Yeah.
So we created the transporter, which is like a larger version of our prior experimental vehicle. No cabin, no occupant. And it's the
Yeah.
biggest revolution in transportation in over 100 years.
It's incredible. And that's the video that I just showed that
Exactly.
came off the website, which is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Boy, would I love to be a fly on the wall and watch some of the other drivers when they see that thing driving around. Because even with the Waymo's, you're always looking in to see, oh, there's no driver in there. And there's just a
Yes.
steering wheel. It's a
Yes.
regular car with an invisible man, basically, right? But this, it's just a box driving down the freeway. That must just be wild for people.
Exactly. And actually we've been, we have a full functioning prototype that we're experimenting in California and the Bay Area, and people are wild. Like, especially children, they love this.
I'm sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the old saying, the future is now. I mean, that it's really incredible. And, at first you always thought about, someone like Amazon, what are they doing? They talked at one point about developing this fleet of drones, but you think about it, if you think it's tough to drive on the street, imagine the air filled with, millions of drones
Yes.
flying around. There's a lot of,
Yes.
a lot of safety issues related to that. And then the payload is going to be limited. I mean, if you measure delivery in terms of cost per pound or whatever, this seems like the most effective way to actually be profitable too in terms of fee structure. So where are you guys right now? Next stage, are you raising a bunch of money? Are you looking to develop strategic partnerships? Kind of where are you in the development of this product?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we have a functioning prototype for our third generation vehicle, which we think is the ultimate generation.
Okay.
And by the way, this vehicle has extraordinary capabilities or capacities for the future, because once we have this technology done for the size of vehicle that we currently have, which is the transporter about the size of a Ford Transit, or like a typical UPS or Amazon
Yeah.
a truck. It's about that size, like a Class 4 vehicle. Then we can expand it and make it longer to become a Class 8 vehicle at one point. And it's using the same technology, make it smaller, and a Class 1 vehicle if we need a little bit more of a smaller vehicle to navigate city streets. So there's a ton of possibilities given to us with that technology. Now we have to go from the prototype to mass production, and in the automobile world, it goes through a certain number of steps. Oftentimes we call them B samples and C samples, which are pre-production samples, and then production. And we have very large amount of contracts signed for our B samples. And so now we need to raise the funding for to get us to go all the way to production. And I'm happy to say that we're making excellent progress with a couple of very, very large funds.
That's awesome.
To raise the hundreds of millions that we need to go there.
I'm sure people have interest because, again, it's so immediately demonstrable. And I know that over the years, as we've talked about this, you just didn't come up with an idea without testing the market. You look very seriously at product market fit. And I know there are so many large, I guess we could call them retailers in a way, that felt it was so compelling, not only the service aspect, but the potential cost issue. And I remember you sharing some economics from a client's perspective when you went into what it costs in terms of the drivers, the limited amount of time they can be on the road, workman's comp from injuries, all these different things. It was a very compelling use case for these big potential clients as well. So I got to imagine they're very excited. What's it like when you go on and show this today and explain it to a major player, a big grocery store out there, like you said, of a Walmart or a Target? What's their immediate reaction to all this?
Look, this is my fourth company, and I've never seen anything like this. Never.
Wow.
The phone's ringing. I mean, we don't even have to do marketing at all in order to get fun and major clients. I mean,
Yeah.
we've already signed major clients, including, I think that's public information about the U.S. Air Force, for instance. And a bunch of other ones, very well known. And we're in discussions with, extremely large clients that all reached out to us. The demand is overwhelming. It's far greater than we imagined. We anticipated. Everybody wants it in North America, in Europe, and in parts of Asia.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly exciting. And the reason is because we're solving three major challenges of delivery. One, of course, is cost. The driver represents, on average, in America or in Europe, 60% on average of the cost of delivery. And sometimes when you get into the holiday season, it can go up to 80 or 85% of the cost of delivery.
I think most people are going to be shocked by that.
Yes.
You would think it's an important part, but you think the cost of the vehicle, the fuel, compliance, all these other things, you would never think it would be 60 to 80% of the total delivery cost. So that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's not just the cost of the driver. It's also management overhead to manage the drivers, the churn of drivers. Mm-hmm. You have drivers that stay for 3 days at FedEx, and then they move on to UPS because they get $1 more per hour. And then they go from UPS to Amazon and so forth, so on. And so you have to manage them, train them, replace them. It's extremely costly. Cost of accidents. The cost of accidents is enormous in the delivery industry. And, of course, the premise is that the computer is going to make a lot less mistakes than the drivers. And finally, you have something very important, which is the transition to electrification, which is a massive subject, of course, these days everywhere. And the problem is that the cost of electrification for trucks is very high. You need a sizable battery. We're offering our vehicles with two options: 125, 160 kilowatt hour. So these are massive batteries that cost a lot of money. And then the cost of electricity and the lack of infrastructure. So there's a very costly transition for trucks to go to electrification. And because we remove the cost of the driver, there's a trade-off that allows us to accelerate the sustainability of transportation by moving faster in the delivery space.
Yeah, the whole thing's absolutely amazing. I mean, maybe people will, knock on wood, kill me for saying this, but having seen so many Waymos, like I can't even leave my neighborhood without seeing, literally, they're just everywhere. It's ubiquitous at this point. And for the first time last week, I was talking to my wife, and I said, I trust these cars way more than I do human beings. Like, I thought that transition would take a while, right? You're thinking, oh, some hacker's going to come in and boom, they're all going to crash at one time, or they don't really understand the rules of the road, or, what the situation is. And they follow the rules. They're safer. I have made that mental switch to where I could see a world of autonomous driving being better in some ways. I still haven't figured out. I mean, everybody drives 80 miles an hour on the freeway here when it's 60 or 65 miles an hour. So I don't know if they'll, what the traffic patterns will be like ultimately when everybody's driving exactly on the speed limit. You got to get somewhere in time. I don't know. We'll figure out what as it comes. But
Well,
what's that?
be surprised. First of all, that's one thing that's interesting about Waymo is that we in San Francisco are so used to that, but believe me, like the rest of the world has no idea. I mean, some places in the United States they don't know what we're going on, and that's not even talking about Europe. You go to Europe, they say, well, really, this is happening. Huh. And they have no idea. But the second thing is that it is extremely advanced and incredibly comfortable. And once you've tested this, I can tell you can't go backwards. I have a Tesla, and with the hardware 4 and FSD 13 point, I don't know. They just uploaded.
They upgraded everything too.
Yeah, upgraded 13.3 by now, maybe something, and it's mind blowing. I'm going to my home to my office, which is about an hour of driving, down, from Marine to the peninsula, without touching the wheel. And
that's incredible.
Zero disengagement, and it is the new FSD software on Tesla is absolutely mind blowing. I go from my garage to the office garage without touching the wheel, and it navigates parking lots. It is mind blowing. So we're there, and it's comfortable.
It is, and I would say it's the coolest thing I'd ever seen in live in person. Outside of I had the luck of watching the space shuttle take off once, and it was one of the most moving experiences I ever had. The sound, the just a crowd there, and watching this technology, thinking of what we were doing with it. And I'm around technology all the time, but when I saw this, literally, as a kid that grew up, in the 60s and 70s, talking about the Jetsons, this was a fantasy. Used to go to Disneyland to be in kind of a driverless car, and it's hard to believe that it's happening. It's happening so quickly, and like you said, we're used to it. But these are coming to a neighborhood near you, as the saying goes. And then the minute you see it and you experience how cool it is and easy it is, you're never turning back. So what I'd love to do, I want to pivot real quickly because this is the fourth company. You've never seen anything like it. But let's go back to the beginning for just a couple minutes. What was it like growing up in France? What was it like to be an entrepreneur in France? And why did you decide to make the move and permanently relocate and make America your home for the long run?
Oh, that's a big story. The short answer is it wasn't great.
No. Well, when did you come here? When did you make that decision?
So I made the decision in 1999 when I started my second company, and I had an idea on to do something on the internet, which as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, was a free lottery, and I'll come back to the idea. But and at the time in 1999, first of all, France was not a very good environment for entrepreneurs and startups. They barely knew what startups were. You had no exits, no venture capital, none of that. But even more than that, they had no idea what the internet was, or barely any idea. I mean, in 1999, I was explaining to my father that emails would be the next big thing, and he said, "Why do I need emails? I got a fax machine."
Yeah.
So that was 1999 in France. They had no idea. So I said, it's not the place where I want to do business. And I came to California. Didn't know anybody in California except one person who happened to be a VC. And it was a interesting story. It was in June 1999, and I flew to California and met with this person who was a VC at the time. and said, this is the idea I have on the internet. I have this free lottery idea. And he goes, wow, that's great. You got $500,000 and you start tomorrow. And I said, well, I gotta go back to France first and figure it out. He said, no, you stay here. It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. And so I and that and that was the beginning of, a love story with California. I've been naturalized an American citizen, and proudly so, in 2009. And I'm not going anywhere. I have raised a family here, and it's all good.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the story of kind of the American dream. I talk to so many people, obviously in the tech community. So many people came from other countries. They either started as students or they came over here, and they all kind of share the same idea that the flow of ideas here. And again, I'm biased a little bit by California, home of the Silicon Valley. That's kind of most venture capital is, and it's kind of where I've been for 40 years. They all share that same sentiment that people are open to new ideas coming from anywhere. And rather than say, no, that can't be the case or that can't happen, they say, well, what it would take to do something like that? Or what would the world be like if we could do something like that? And I think it's an amazing place. And I think sometimes as Americans, because we're surrounded by it all the time, and that is the general ethos that you learn as a child, not that everybody experiences it, but it is kind of the general ethos. I think we're somewhat a little bit numb to it. And then you meet somebody and they explain, wow, and you realize this is really a special place to be, particularly for entrepreneurialism.
And the amazing thing, Tim, is that the gap, in my opinion, and of course, I know both Europe and United States extremely well. And I go back to Europe to see my family and spend time there from time to time. And the gap is increasing by the largest speed and amount that I've ever seen in my life. Mark my words. Like you have, I think in 2024 there was about $65 billion invested in AI in America. In comparison, in France, it was 1.2 billion. So,
oh my gosh,
there's not a 60x difference between France and the United States in terms of size and populations, but it's a 5x difference. You got 60 million people in France. You got 300 plus million in America. It shouldn't be a gap like this. Regulation is strangulating Europe. Like, you have no idea. We're talking about Doge here. We're talking about what President Trump is doing with 10
regulations removed for everyone added. Yeah, he just came out the other day talking about that.
Regulations for one new one. Well, you have no idea the nightmare it is in Europe. In fact, I think Elon Musk recently said that to get the permit to build the Gigafactory in Berlin, they had to document 25,000 pages of documents in order to get the permit. And guess what? It wasn't even sent through the internet via email. No, there were printed copies. They had to deliver a truckload of pages to the German administration in order to get to the permit, and stamped all of them one by one. Can you believe this in the 21st century?
I can. I'm so encouraged. The infrastructure meeting that President Trump had the other day, the one with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman and the head of SoftBank, for a group collectively to decide to invest $500 billion, right, in infrastructure, a lot being physical data centers, right? There's no way anyone would do that if they didn't think they could get the approval in a short leash to go ahead and build these facilities. So that's super encouraging.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm telling my friends in France or in Europe in general, like, look at what the United States are doing and try to do the same thing. But no, they're bogged down into other, small, issues. Well,
that's where they tell their entrepreneurial children, hey, one-way ticket to the United States. Let's get it going. I'll miss you, but I'll come visit you.
Exactly.
But hey, on that note, to wrap it up, with children moving, I know you have 4 kids in this world of automation, AI, potential voyages to Mars and beyond. What type of guidance or direction as an entrepreneur, as a tech guy, are you sharing with them about kind of the future of the world and what opportunities could look like for them. What's the general fatherly advice as we're changing this paradigm so quickly? And yours are a little bit older than my four, but I'm interested to learn what you're going to say because I struggle too. It's exciting to talk to them about the future, but I just love to hear your perspective, what you're sharing with them these days.
I think it goes down to about three things that are very important. First of all, think big. That is a very important thing. It takes the same amount of effort and the same amount of hardship to create something that's small or to create something that's big. So you might as well do something big. Think big is a very, very important thing. Second one is perseverance. It's extremely difficult and perhaps even more difficult these days than it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago to create a viable startup. You could create a startup, but a viable one is a whole different story. Avoid false good ideas. So think about your ideas. Don't make the mistake of, dreaming about something that's not going to happen or that clients will never buy. And persevere. Perseverance is a huge thing. And then the third one is get excited, passionate about what you're doing, because it's very likely that you're going to spend more time in the office than anything else you're doing. So if you're not passionate about what